Okay, so I just thought to start things off, maybe just review kind of what we went over last week. Um, so what I kind of mentioned last week was the way I really found easier for me to learn in the beginning was to find frameworks, kind of like sentences where I could change individual pieces and just keep changing the pieces to get different sentences. So this is all just from my own journey, so if I ever come off like I'm the ultimate truth, I apologize for that. That's just the way I'm phrasing it. But when I started, one of the main concepts that was hard for me to grasp was when we're talking about something in Cree. Well, let's back up. So I'm going to recap all of last week, and then we can move on to some newer stuff. So last week I talked about how when we say something in any language, something has to be talked about and something has to happen. So we have what in linguistics we call the noun and the verb. The noun is the thing we're talking about, and the verb is the action. So a noun in English is anything you can put the word the in front of, and a verb is any word you can put the word to in front of. So if you're trying to figure out if something is noun, like dog, you can say the dog. Is happiness a noun? Well, you can put the in front of happiness, right? Like the happiness I felt. So then you can tell that that's a noun. If you want to know what a verb is, if you could put the word to in front of it, so like run, to see, to dive, to go, those are all verbs, right? The action words. So in Cree, we actually have two different types of nouns, and they go under various different names. A lot of people are common with animate and inanimate, but for the purposes here tonight, we'll just review that I just put them in two different colors just to show the difference. And then when I make these frameworks that I talked about, I just put the color where it needs to go. So, and this is actually a very important distinction because we have to decide what we're talking about to decide what word we're going to use to describe the action that it's making. And this stuff is harder to explain than to be able to deduce from examples. So let's just run over some of the examples from last week. If we take these ones on the left side, we've got kinoseo, fish, wapus, rabbit, and a tim, dog. And those will fit in with any of these frameworks that we make where there's red. So whenever, something that I found really useful when I started was, if I say one of these words, I always put the word awa after it. And the reason I memorize those together is awa tells me that it'll fit within all of the frameworks, whether we say animate frameworks or whether we say this color frameworks, it's all the same thing. But I always learn together. So let's start off with kinoseo awa and wapusoa. So we can see all we're doing is we're taking the word and we're just plugging it in front. So that's a pretty simple framework. We're simply adding the word at the end. And now let's look at what that means. When we put a wa after the word, after the noun, it means this is a, whatever the noun is. So kinoseo wa, this is a fish. Wapusoa, this is a rabbit. Atimawa, this is a dog. And what's really neat is we can put a wa in front of the noun, and now we have, it's demonstrating what the noun is. It's what they call in linguistics is a demonstrative. So we can put a wa in front of kinoseo and get awa kinoseo, and it means that fish. Or awa tim means that dog, like the one I'm talking about. Now, if we jump over to the other side, we notice right away that we actually use a different word here. So to say this is a dish, like oyagan, we'd say oyagan oma. Notice we don't say oyagan awa. And so this is why when I try and learn these words, or something I found useful when I started was I always learned it as a phrase. I didn't learn oyagan means dish. I learned oyagan oma means this is a dish. And then later on when I was trying to figure out, is oyagan a green word or a red word or an inanimate word or an animate word, or however you want to describe those, I would always think oyagan oma. Oh yeah, okay, so it's part of the green words or part of the inanimate words, however you want to describe it. So again, these same frameworks, we notice it's the same. Oyagan oma is this is a dish, but if we put oma before oyagan, I'm talking about a specific dish like oma oyagan kasipigan naman, this dish that I'm washing. Maskasin oma, this is a shoe, but oma maskasin means this shoe. And astotin oma, this is a hat, but oma astotin, this hat. Now, when we go a step farther, why it's important to keep this differentiation is because the verbs that we use, the words that describe either what's happening or what that object is doing, change as well. So if we look over at kinoseo, I've put these verbs, I put everything in colors just to differentiate it. But if we look here, I guess I used mionago so. So if we come down here, mionago se is to look good. So we use mionago so with kinoseo, but we actually use mionaguan with maskasin. So again, we can see that this differentiation between the red and the green, or the animate versus inanimate, it's really important just so we know what words to use with the word we're talking about. So first we figure out what we're talking about, and then we figure out which one of these it is, and then we figure out what verb to use with it. So kinoseo mionago so, the fish, it looks good. Kinoseo gogio, the fish dives. And atim pimoteo. So I'm just switching the verbs here. But we notice that when I jump over here, I don't use mionago so, I use mionaguan. If I was to use machinago so, like if I wanted to say the fish is ugly, I would say kinoseo machinago so. But if I wanted to say one of the words over here, so if we take astotin, since it's in the green, we would say machinaguan. So again, this just falls back on it's important to know which column, which color, which in linguistics they call it gender, the noun is. And so expanding on how I used frameworks, so we started with owa kinoseo, and then we're going to add an action. So we're going to say kinoseo mionago, so the fish is good looking, the fish looks good. But we can then add a wa to specify this fish looks good. So we would get awa kinoseo mionago so. And we can see that in the framework here. We say awa, and then we have one of the words in red, and then one of the words from the blue. So then we can swap in any word we want. So we could say, awa atim. So we'll pull that word into the red here. And then, I don't know, mich so. So we're going to grab mich so from the box here, and we'll put it here. So, so for the green verbs, or the green nouns, sorry, we're going to pull all these colored verbs. And I didn't grab as many for these, but there are just similar. So we would just grab like oma oyagan noguan. So we grab nogua from here and put it in there. Oma sutin machinaguan. So we covered that last week, and this is just a refresher. And now as we go in further into the language, we might just not want to talk about a dog sitting or a cup being clean or a good looking fish. Usually when we tell a story, we want to talk about something affecting something else. And again, this is where that comes into play. So whatever we're talking about is in this column or that column, this color or that color, we come over here. When we start adding in, we have basically 4 scenarios. One scenario, we have one of these nouns. One scenario, we have one of these nouns. One scenario, we have one of these nouns affecting one of these nouns, which is this one. I forgot to change these. I changed the color at the request of Aaron here, but I forgot to update this. So we have a red object affecting a green object, or we have 2 red objects. So let's go over the situation. So if you wanted to say the fish, gogi is to dive. So if we took the fish and put it in here, and then we add, dives, we get the fish dives, but that's just one red object, right? Now, if we wanted to say the fish dived by hand the pot into water, we would take the fish, we'd add it here, we'd add goginum, we'd add it here, and this is and then we would take the green object and we'd add it here. But if the fish was affecting a rabbit, now we have two red objects. So we would use a red object, we'd put the verb from here in the middle, and we put the other object here, so we would get something like wapus gogeneo kinosewa. And you can notice how there's a few little things extra that we're putting on here. At first, when I make the frameworks, I just want to practice saying things, right? I just want to get the words rolling off my out of my mouth, basically, when I started. So, I just want to take kinoseo, wapameo, wapusa, wapus, wapameo, atimwa, atim, wapameo, kinosewa, right? And I can just sit there and keep moving words around. And the more and more times I say wapameo, the more and more likely the meaning's going to stick, right? Wapameo is to see. Sorry, it's right here. Now let's try gogeneo. Wapus gogeneo kinosewa. The rabbit dunks the fish underwater. So, yeah, stop right there for a second and just, does anyone have any questions from last week's stuff? Because I want to kind of move more into this sort of thing that we're talking about here. But I don't want it to be murky water, so everyone good? Or I can't see anyone on my screen, so you have to speak if you have any questions.
It's good for me. It's wrong.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Let's try. Let's do it.
Okay. Aaron, you got this? I know sometimes you need a little...
I've had my hand up for like 10 minutes now, but
okay.
That's okay. Just keep going.
Oh, you need the exercise, so that's good. How maga. So I want to talk... yesterday I talked about, this is the overview, but then I want to draw you the whole map. I can't walk you through the forest, but I can show you kind of the lay of the land from what I can see from my vantage point, and kind of like some of the shortcuts that really help me. So let's talk about these words I have up here. So if we look at gogi, this literally means to go underwater or to dive, and anyone can jump in here if they have a different interpretation of the word. But if we notice, if we take, all of a sudden, if we're dunking an object, it goes to gogi num. This is a bit, I think I talked about this. Did I talk about this a little bit yesterday with active? I like to use that example. Does anyone remember? Did I talk about that last week? Act and active and activity?
A little bit,
Maybe
yeah.
not. Okay, I'll go over that really.
But yeah, just
Did I
do
do
a
that
quick
last
review,
week?
Ben. It'll be fine.
Sure. So I'm just going to pull a review from English. So if we took the word act, what does this mean in English? Anyone just shout it out. Help me beat the silence here.
To do something?
Okay. What does action mean?
You're already doing something?
Close. It'd be something that you do, right? You do an action like a, yeah. It's like a motion.
Like walking.
Or,
Walking.
exactly, yeah.
Singing.
What about active?
It's kind of past tense, isn't it? Or I was active, like the way you say it.
It's describing you, right? So we'll say it's a description. What about activity?
It's not really specific though. It's like a general.
Something
you
that,
do something?
yeah, it's like kind of something that's done, like something you'd have on your
An action
license.
describes a behavior.
Okay.
Because I was going to say movement, but if you're sitting still, that's it's still an action.
Okay.
It's actually what it describes a behavior.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I like that. So we've got act, to do something. We've got an action, that's something that you do or something that describes behavior or movement. We've got active, which is a description of the person who does the act. We've got activity. If this seems a bit bizarre, trust me, there's a reason for it. Activity is kind of like, I don't know, something that you do. It gets kind of tricky to explain. What about activation?
It's starting something.
Okay.
Like a processing.
Yeah. Okay. What about, I don't know, can we think of any other words that have act in it? Well, that's good enough for now anyway. If you think any more.
Activist.
Activist, yeah, okay, that works, yeah. So if you know, okay. A person who acts. I mean, we know there's a more specific meaning, but in the base of it all. So if
It's
you
like a
look at,
person who is active though, right?
yeah, okay.
Takes action on an issue. I don't know.
Okay, so you can see how they're kind of hard to describe, but I'm sure none of these words stumped anybody. Like we read these words all the time. You know, you're going to read that in a book. You're not even going to think twice. But the whole point is when we try to describe them, it gets really tricky because descriptions are just difficult in general. But if we
You
look
need
at the,
context. That's why.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
sure, that works for me. If we look at these, let's start breaking them apart. Oh, I forgot activate. Oops, hang on. Activate. What does activate mean?
To start something.
Okay. So if we look at all these words, you notice that when I break them down, they're all made of little pieces and they're all recycled pieces. Okay. In linguistics, this is called a morpheme, one of these little pieces. It's kind of like, yeah, it's the little building blocks to words. So I want to take this whole concept and show you that it's not foreign to us. Our brain already knows how to do this, even if we don't think of activation as 4 different words. Our brain already kind of knows that it's related to act and active and activity. We might not know that consciously, but our brain does. But we can actually use this, or I've found some value in using this in my study process. So let's go jump back to goganeo. Now, if you notice all of these words, except for these 2, which I'll just if I can make my mouse listen to me, italicize, we'll just leave those alone. But if you look at the rest of them, they all have gogi in them, right? So you can kind of see the preface to this. So we've got these little pieces, gogi paye, gogi pitch, ige, gogi pe, su, pit, iwe, gogene, we, gogene, ige, goge, nam. Now I'm cheating and showing you where they split here, right? This is the hard part as a beginner, to know where things split apart. But if we notice, they all have gogi in them, and some of them just have like 1 extra letter. So what I want to show here is these little pieces are what drive. So we can think about it as, okay, I have 1 red object and 1 green object, and I need to use this specific word from the dictionary. And that process works. If I wanted to say I dunked this in the water, I could say kino seo goginam oyagan. That's fine. I can look up goginam, and that's good. Goginam. But I can also look at it the other way. If I learn these pieces, theoretically, I could put them together to make the word I want to make. So I'm going to just jump right in here. So if we take goge and we add an N, it literally means dive, submerging underwater, and then the N means a hand. Okay. Or I'm going to also preface, there's another N that means by sight or eye, but we're not dealing with that today. So if we got gogin, notice right here, that's all we need for this. So we can take that word, put it into this framework. This stuff in the blue is another process. So we're going to go into that later. But again, I'm just showing you, this is like, I drew you kind of a rough map last week. And this week, I'm kind of showing you the topographical lines of where the land comes up. So I just want to expose you to the idea that a lot of words are very similar. And if we can identify the pieces in them and start to understand how these pieces contribute to the meaning, then when we look up those huge long words like Kiskamamatawigamagook, it doesn't seem like a 27-letter word. It seems like 5 words jammed together, if that makes sense. So in this particular instance, if we took Kinoseo and we took Gogin, which we know is diving or going underwater, and then the end part means by hand. And then if you just trust me that this part right here means that the fish, whoever is here does it to here, and we'll get to that in another lesson. And then we add another red object. Now you see kind of how that's working. It's literally saying a fish diving underwater by hand to the person who has the A after it, if you will. I mean, that's really rough, but you can kind of, I'm trying to show you how the pieces are kind of working together. So, Kinoseo gogeneo wapusa. This A is the one that's telling it that it's the one that it's being done to in this circumstance. So if we took this A off and put it here and we said Kinosewa gogeneo wapus, it would mean that the rabbit dunked the fish in the water. And I know Aaron's happy because he loves teaching this first thing off the go. So I did this just to make him happy, if anyone's wondering. So if we look at that, gogeneo is by hand. If I tell you that the H is just generally causing someone to go underwater, then we have gogeheo. We've changed one letter and we've changed the whole meaning of the verb. If we change the H to a pit, then we get sort of in a lot of instances, and not all of them, these little pieces like we call morphemes, they're not glued to a very, very precise definition. So a lot of times we have to be careful as learners because we'll expect something and it won't quite be what we expect, and that can be kind of frustrating. But you can see they kind of change through here too as well, right? I mean, even though if is here, when we put it on the end to activity, it kind of changes the meaning a bit, but it's still sort of there. So when we come up here, pit usually means to pull. So if we said kinoseo gogepiteo wapus, it would be the fish pulls the rabbit underwater. Whereas before it was kind of like by hand puts it underwater. So there's a slight meaning in there, difference, right? But we also notice that if we don't use, like, so we can use pit for one of these objects, and we can use pit for one of these, we can use pit if we're talking about a red object affecting a green object, or we can use pit if we're talking about a red object affecting a red object, which is actually really useful because you don't have to learn to, like, sometimes when I started learning, I would try and learn like, okay, it's gogi num for if it's inanimate, and it's gogi neo if it's animate. But we don't actually have to know that, because if we know that the N is the same in both of them, then we only have to learn this one part, right? If that makes sense. It's kind of like learning how to add instead of memorizing, like instead of memorizing this, instead of memorizing that 1 + 2 is 3, we kind of learn how to add 1 to 2 and get 3, if that makes sense. It's a slower process, but it shows us how things work, if that makes sense. I just read your note. Yeah, it's definitely not red. It's kind of mauve. But when I put it red, Aaron, you couldn't read the text. So now, if you notice here, when I split these apart, I started adding letters, right? So action, I split that apart and I added a T because I know that the morpheme is shun, right? In this time when it was activity, I split it apart. I added the E back because it's active itty, right? The same thing happens in Cree. So you notice there's certain morphemes that when they get added to previous ones, they change the sound of the last letter. So in this case, this is actually, believe it or not, pit. And if you notice, we have gogipitum, gogipiteo, but then when we add ige after it, it changes it to pitchigeo. It changes that T at the end of pit to a C. And if you add iwe, in some instances, it changes that to an S. So instead of gogi pitueo, we say gogi pisueo. So sometimes these morphemes are a little bit camouflaged, but you get, after you study it long enough, you get to kind of know how they're going to change. A lot of times you got to watch your T's, they're going to change to S's or C's. And there's certain ones that are going to affect it, and certain ones that you notice go ge, and when we add iwe, the same morpheme, it doesn't change the end. So the end doesn't change. If you add ige like we did to pit, and it became pit, if you add it to the end doesn't change. So we don't have to worry about the end, right? So there's like little rules around these that become more and more apparent the more and more a person stares at them. But I just wanted to kind of show you that, like when I started Cree, I was just like, wow, every word is like, 4,000 miles long, but it's actually not. I mean, it might go get pichigeo or, go get pisueo might seem like a really long word, but it's actually just 3 really short words, if that makes sense. And by doing it this way, like when we take a word like, I think I gave, then we can start breaking this up. That's as far as I'll break it now. And we can see that this is kind of like teach, cause, something to someone, to each other, building at that place. Does that kind of make a little bit sense? Again, I'm not going to teach you every one tonight and expect everybody to know it. I just want to expose you to this idea, because I didn't learn this until too long into trying to study long words like this, right? And trying to memorize a long word like this is actually extremely hard, right? Whereas if we just kind of memorize how the little pieces are spelled, we can actually like build the words up, if you will.
In English, it's called whole word language learning versus like phonetic learning. So it totally makes sense to me.
Oh, I've never heard that term. Who said that? Sorry, was that you, Maggie? Oh,
No, it's Nicole.
Nicole.
I'm a teaching assistant. So unfortunately, I've studied a lot of English and had to teach it. So yeah.
Oh, and sorry, what was it called? I gotta jot
Whole
that down. I've
language
never
learning.
actually heard that before. Whole.
So it's basically you memorize what the word looks like almost by the shape, and you don't necessarily remember like the sounds and how to break it down. And so there's a real controversy with teaching kids to read about using whole language versus phonetics, or a combination of both. And so we usually do a combination of both, but you can tell when kids go to one because they guess the words and they guess them incorrectly because they don't know how to break down the sounds.
Very interesting. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
actually gonna look into this and do
Sure.
some read up on that, because I'm not sure phonetics quite the right aspect, but I get what you're saying, like whether memorizing the whole thing as one or learning the individual sounds. Interesting. Cool. Thank you very much. That's awesome. I'm excited to go look into that. Does anyone want to take a spin at this if I grab another common verb and we can kind of deduce it down? Is anyone into that? Or Aaron, what's a good word? You there, Aaron?
Imam Tanita, man.
How about something with a simple... Sorry, guys. I probably should have had an example ready. Let's say Weipe. That's a good one. So I'm going to grab it here 1 second. Okay, so Weipe is kind of like throwing, or if you think of the action of a broom hitting an object, that kind of what happens to the object when the broom sweeps it, that sort of motion away, I guess, if you will. How would, if we use the same template, and sorry, the root morpheme we're starting with is weipe, and I want to say to brush it away with my hand, how would I say that? Oh, sorry, I should probably give the key here. Oops. What else?
Can you say Wepe Is that like Wepe Hill?
Niguepahao? I don't know. There's people in here that could probably answer that question. Niguepahao wapus.
Would that make sense, Lloyd, to you?
Say, what are you trying to say?
Like I brushed the rabbit away,
You'd use your hand for that though, wouldn't you?
I guess. You Wepe now? I don't know if that doesn't sound right to me.
No,
If
that means you threw it away, you wept it now, right?
Wepe now, yeah, okay. Threw it away.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So there you go. You took wepe and you added n, right? So to throw something by hand, and then you put it right here, and you get kinoseo wepeneo wapusa. The fish threw the rabbit away. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Like what just happened there?
You're muted, Lloyd.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to prove to my brother that my volume is down because we're getting a lot of feedback.
I had that happen and I logged out and logged back in and it fixed it, but that's just a guess as to what might be a problem.
No, what the issue is there's two devices in the same room together and they're echoing off of each other.
Oh, yeah, that happens. Yeah. Can you turn one off?
You guys can share. Lloyd and Ken.
I'm going to give another example here other than
They're
wepe.
there.
What if we use the word nagi, which means to stop? How would you say I stopped? How would you say, let's use this framework right here. So how would we say the fish stopped by hand the hat? I know that's a kind of a weird sentence, but so let's go through this. So stop is nagi, and we know that n means hand. So if we take nagi and then add the n, and then you notice up here, it's the exact same thing as up here. We have to add this little am at the end. Actually, I should put that outside. Naginam, yeah. Perfect. I'm just going to put this as something else. We'll just, oh, that's too dark, sorry. We'll just ignore that for right now. We're going to get into all that stuff after. I just wanted to show you first that we can break the words up, and then I'll show you how we can do all these endings if everyone's excited about that. So if we take kinoseo, we put it right here. Actually, I'll just do it underneath. We take nagi, we add the n, and then we add the am from that framework right here. And then we just add the object. Kinoseo naginam astotin, the fish stopped the hat. I know it doesn't make any sense. It's totally just a grammar example. So is this kind of how does everybody feel about this? Can I keep going, or do we want to do a bunch of examples?
Keep going.
No.
Unless someone else.
One is red. That's not the
Okay. So if we take that example nagi, right, and we've got by hand, we can actually add either one of these to it. And so you could say nagi nige. But when we add one of these, maybe I can clarify this with colors a little bit. I don't have the color anymore. Just a second. That'll have to be close enough. So if we look at this, when we add this ending on, it actually turns it into one of these type of verbs. So then we have to use this construction here. So kinoseo, right? We picked a red noun. We take nagi, which is to stop. We add the n for by hand, and then we add ige. And what ige does, it means things in general, to stop things. But once you add ige, it doesn't go in here anymore, or in here. So you notice go ginam is here, and go get, or these shouldn't be here, sorry. Go gin is here, and go gin is here. But once we add the ige, we're back over here. And that same thing happens with nagi. When we add the ige to mean I stop, she or he stopped things in general, like kinoseo nagi neo, the fish stops things. It goes back into the blue type, if that makes sense. The reason these divisions are important is the endings, this W will change a whole bunch, or this AM will change a whole bunch, or this EW will change a whole bunch, and they change differently. So that's why we kind of need to understand where the word's going to fall before we start adding these endings in. So we've got, oops, 1 second here, my computer's not listening to me. We've got and then if we take that same stop, we add an N and we add away, this means stop by hand people. So, and I can give you the dictionary definition here, or what they kind of define it as in the dictionary, which is similar. But again, this away, you'll notice it's right here. It puts it into this type of verb. So you can only put it in this construction. You can't say kinoseo naginnegeo astotin. It doesn't really work. I mean, you could, and somebody might understand it, but it's kind of awkward. Kinoseo naginam astotin works better, if you will. So if we put it here, then we have to fall into this framework. So by doing this, by using this chart, if someone is so motivated, they can look at how a word is constructed. So these words end in ige. So later on, eventually, after I look at these long enough, now anything that ends in ige, like that's a verb, I know is going to be this type, so that I know that any framework, like this is only 2, you can make thousands, right? It'll fit into those. So then I have all those frameworks in my head, or the ones that I know, and then I can just put those verbs in to make the meaning I want. So Adrian, you and I are talking about like, how do we get to a point where we can converse? And I was talking about like making sentences back and forth, right? And this is kind of the process that I used, where we make lots of sentences, and then we just alternate the words in the sentences to practice. And then eventually those words are kind of, hopefully, someday at a point where we don't even think about them, and then we just talk. How's everybody feel about this? It's kind of scary on this end. It's totally silent.
We're processing mentally.
Okay.
I tell you, I'm not, I can't even speak English properly. So, and the grammar I failed. I don't know how many times I've failed grammar, because it just does, for me, it doesn't make any sense.
No? Okay.
Oh, I was just mentioning to Lloyd is that I said, I'd like to take a prayer, right? And kind of break the prayer down.
Okay.
Into its parts like that for me, because I hear it more often than I see this grammar stuff.
Yeah.
So,
what if instead of a prayer, if I just grab a paragraph out of a story, would that work for you? I can. I know this is helpful, but again, I've taken grammar in university classes, and I still don't get it. I can write it, right? Yeah.
But for me to take, even now, to take something I've written and ask me to break it down, I go, nope, I wouldn't know how to do it.
No, that's fair, and this method might not work for everybody either. It's just something that, like,
I think I've been hit too many times.
I guess I should explain. I don't think so at all. It kind of takes a bit of getting used to, for sure.
I'm following it, but this fits my style of learning.
Okay.
So, but I could see why it doesn't necessarily fit others people's style of learning, because I know my grammar really well, but I didn't learn it until I learned to speak Spanish, and then it made sense. Then I learned English grammar when I learned to speak Spanish. But for something like this, it fits with my way of thinking, because I've learned the grammar in a number of different languages. But initially, like, if I went back to grade 7, I couldn't follow this at all. So
cool, yeah.
But if it makes sense to some people, it makes sense to me. So I'm good with it. I went back and I took what you presented last week, Ben, and I started studying it and breaking it down and playing with it.
Okay.
Which is what I like to do. And then it all started making sense. So now I'm back to, okay, now I have to start again, but next week I'll get it.
Okay, perfect. Are you guys cool if we keep going, or what?
Yeah. I find it quite confusing.
Okay.
I think I would have to play with it for a lot. Just work on it. But and I taught kids how to read and write for 30 years. So this is embarrassing.
It's a different game.
For me, I think this is more advanced than where I'm at.
Okay.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Yeah,
okay.
Me too.
We can wheel it back a bit too. Do we want to kind of wheel it back to kind of a little bit more simple things? Would that kind of making some basic phrases and stuff? Because we can do that too. I was trying to just kind of expose you to the idea. I didn't expect you to be able to do full morphological breakdowns by the end of this. I just wanted to show you that there are little pieces in the word that if we do learn, we can grasp that way. Why don't we
I've been doing this for 16 months, and this is at about my level. And I started from...
Well, we can yak another time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ron, you guys need one-on-one lessons and you'll be way ahead.
No. I appreciate this. This is really good for me, but it may not fit for everybody. So, by all means, try another approach. But I like looking at prayers and paragraphs too.
I think our brains...
I was just going to do this real quick because...
I was going to say our brains need more processing time.
Yeah, it might be hitting the point of overload, Ben. It might be
Okay, let's yeah. What do you guys want to do?
I do.
A smaller paragraph.
Oh no, I wasn't going to do the whole paragraph. See how I just bolded some words? I was just going to show you how they fit into that paradigm. There's a whole lot of words in these that aren't going to fit the 4 categories that I showed you, and that's because they're different types of words. So I was just going to skip over them, but we don't have to do this for sure. That was just an idea.
Well, can you post what you did so far, Ben? Because that's really helpful. And then from there,
it's being recorded.
This thing right here? Yeah, we can give you the video after.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure. Okay.
This is really helpful for me.
Let's back up here and let's put the pressure on Aaron. What do you think? What type of verb do you want to do inflection for, Aaron?
Let's just pick something really simple like bimote.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about when you're reading a book and the whole book is like, I do this and then I saw this person go there and then I saw this person go there. Does anyone know what we call that book? Like that the type of writing style it is? Are we familiar with the term first person? Like the story is written in first person and it's all like, I do this, I do that, I do this.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So hang on a second. I got so many pages here. I don't know where I am. So if we think of first person as me, right? Actually, let's use the Cree words.
That word.
Okay. We've got,
Nina.
we've all read third person novels, which is like Bob went to town and Frank did this
Nina?
and Sally and Henry met at the wagon or whatever. So that we're talking about like she or he or them, right? So,
Yeah.
oops. And so, and then the second person, which is very rare to see in books, but you can actually find books that are like, okay, so you're walking down the street and you see the lamppost in the end of the road, and the whole book is written like that. And that's in second person because it's all like, you do this and you do that. And it's not a very common book or type, but yeah. So we're kind of familiar with the first person, second person, third person. So again, jumping up to the top, we had those kind of verbs right here that only involve one red object, right? So in that case, we had, sorry about all the jump around, we had a sentence like, right, the fish dives. This is actually, if we look at right here, we break this word apart. This is the part that actually means she or he. So we could actually, or I'm just gonna use this right here to mean it right now. So she or he dives. So this could literally mean the fish, she or he dives. And this part that's in the blue is the part that designates who it is that's diving. And so we call that the third person, like we did up here with weah. And if you notice, that W is right there. But if we wanted to say that I dive, we can make a framework like this. Now, so before I made frameworks of how the words fit into a phrase, now I'm making frameworks of how the pieces fit into a word. So we can add the verb right here, and we get nigogin, and that means, and you notice this matches right here. Okay, so can anyone guess how we'd say you dive?
Key.
Ke. So that's important too. It's because key actually means something else. So that length is important. And so if we look at that, does that make sense? I'm trying to show that there's a gap, like it's like a framework, but it kind of looks ugly.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Maybe, yeah. There, and then I can just make the word normal. So
Does that cook you?
So yeah. So one sec. Can you guys give me about 20 seconds here? I'm going to do this properly so we're not fighting it the whole time.
I don't know if I can do that.
So,
No.
Yeah, I had 8 or 9 seconds max. I'm not sure. 20 is really pushing it, Ben.
oh, it's a sarcastic group here tonight. I like it.
There's nothing worse than being in the hot seat, eh?
Yeah. Well, you know, I did have so much prep time for this, so okay. So if we look at this whole table here, we can see that these are the frameworks and these are the results, right? So let's take some examples, and some people might be familiar with this, but let's just go over some of these. No, let's go. Let's use these three. Who's brave? Who wants to do some examples reading? Somebody volunteer?
Okay.
Perfect. So
So-
can you take these words and put them in each one of these frameworks? So I'll do the first one and then you do the second two. So if I take mich so, I would have nemich sun, kimich sun, mich so.
Okay.
So if you take gogi and do the same thing,
Nikokin,
yeah,
Kinoki Kokin,
yeah, kegogin,
Pima Pimipatao, Pimipatao,
pimpatao, yeah, perfect. Except for let's put gogi here too.
Koki, Kokio,
Gogio, perfect. And now let's put pimpata in all three. So start over here.
Ni Pimipatan,
Yeah. Here, I'm going to put this in brackets so you don't have to worry. Don't worry about pronouncing this I.
Pimpatan, yeah.
There you go. Ne pimpatan.
Yeah, ni Pimipatan, Ki Pimipatan, Pimatan,
Ki pimpatan, yeah.
and Pimpatao.
Perfect. Nice. So you can see all we did was take these words and we put them in these little blanks, right? And we've changed it from eat, which is actually another 20 seconds of sarcastic ridicule coming up here. We will put this here.
Time's up.
So I put the exclamation mark after because if you say these words on their own, it's like a command, right? So mich so is like eat, gogi, dive, pimpata, run, right? And then when we put them into these frameworks, we get nimich sun, I eat, kimich sun, you eat, mich so, she or he eats. So we can see how it changes the meaning, right? First we have a command and then we have kind of a statement, right? Like nigogin, I dive. It's like a statement or I'm diving. But whereas if you just say gogi, it's like, you know, jump off into the water right now. It's a command. So I'll just put that here. Like,
So I'm wondering, because ni, ki, we, right? Is the rule of thumb that when it's like an observation, the third person, that the W is at the end of the word instead of at the beginning, like a we?
I mean, that's an interesting read. I don't have the ability to actually say that's the reason for it. I just know this is the pattern, if you will. Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation. Be interesting to figure that one out. But notice we have ends here too, right? So this is like a suffix because it comes at the end, but these ones are actually circumfixes because you put them both at the beginning and the end. So I'm not quite sure if that has to do with interpretation or if that's just the kind of, I guess, way it is. I've been dabbling in languages long enough that I actually don't try and figure stuff like that out because a lot of times it's just like the only answer a person can come up with is like, that's just the way it is. I don't know. It makes
Just think
it
of it as
easier.
conjugating verbs according to a pattern.
Yeah. That's
You know,
kind of,
it's always good too.
sorry, I missed that last comment.
I don't know is always a good answer too.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth. I don't know. But it's definitely interesting.
Good to keep in mind
So
that
if we take
sorry,
this,
Ben, I was just gonna
go ahead.
just keep in mind that that the sounds came first, right? So the W is just sort of an interpretation, or it's there for like a particular reason in SRO. Like if you say they all eat, all of them, mitsuwak. So there's the W is there for a reason, but it having to do with, like, I think you were saying like nia, kia, wia. There are some words in third person form that they either start with an O or they do start with a W in that particular case, but whether they're related or not is hard to say. It just has to do with that, like Ben said, that's just the way you say it. But the particular writing that we use with the W is incidental based on the sounds, right?
I have another question, but it's not probably not related to this. Maybe it's a whole other lesson. But in the words like mitsu and mitsu, there's an I in there, in the middle there, and then pimpata.
Yeah, there's an I as well.
There's an I there. How do you know when not to pronounce that I or take that out?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You're looking at pretty much two of the most irregular verbs in the language. Normally, so this is awesome. Okay, so normally let's take a word like no, not something with a Y. I don't know. Give me a word there, Aaron, to use as an example. I'm going to pull you in on this.
Are you just looking for something without collapsation?
Something that I can give a stress pattern with.
Use nehio.
You're just mean now. Okay, I'm going to use nehio.
Nope. Start with nehio. Do the stress on that first, then go to nehio.
Okay.
Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, but I was trying to stay away from glides. But anyway, okay, so we've got nehio, which is 3 syllables long. Aaron's gonna get me in trouble here. Okay, this is another one of those slightly irregular words depending on the region you're from. But in general, in Cree, or in the regions I'm familiar with, if there's 3 syllables, so nehio or nehio, depending on the region you're in, you come back from the right side and you go 1, 2, and then this syllable is stressed. So you'd say nehio. You wouldn't say nehio or nehio, you'd say nehio. But when we take a word like, I'll just write the word out normally so we can see. If we take this word, can be turned into a verb by adding an E to the end. So we can have nehio way. And funny enough, let's put that in this is this type of verb, so we can put it in here. So now if we go back, we have 1, 2, 3. Nehioe. Okay, so the stress pattern changes based on how long the word is, right? So we can keep adding, and this is getting into those pieces again, right? So I don't want to go too far off the deep end here, but I do want to kind of show the point here. If you have ne, he, oh, way, okay, I should go there. Win. Okay, so now we've got win, I pronounce it nehiawewin, but some places say nehiowewin, okay? They're the same word, it's a regional change based on how this AW is pronounced. But you notice now the stress is here, nehiowewin, nehiawewin, nehiowewin. So the stress is changing based on where it is in the word. So if we take a word like tanase, it's made of these 2 pieces, so we spell it that way. But if we go 3 syllables back, so we have I, is, and tan. This is the stress. Sorry, I should split it like this. Tan, I, se. And when we move back 1, 2, 3, so this is the stress. This stress is so loud that we don't hear this syllable. Tanse, tanse, tanese, tanse. It's kind of like the tan pushes over that short I and you just hear tanse, tanse, but that I is still there because this word is made up from tan and ese. Like tan, which is in tante, and taniego, all those other words that have tan, right? They have this tan piece. And the ese is in all sorts of words. You could say, ese matisian, I'm living that way, or you could say nigi ito dan sagahigan kese, I went to the lake, right? So this ise when we pronounce it in other places, you hear ise. So when we write it as part of the word, we still spell it tan ise because it's those two pieces, and visually we know what that word means, even though due to the stress pattern, that middle I drops out. So that is not what's happening in these two examples. These are the two examples that kind of don't follow the rule, and I don't know why, to be honest with you. They're sort of irregular, but to be honest, it's two examples, so we just memorize that it's mich so, and then that's interesting. So if we take this pattern, I'm going to give one more right here. If we had something like this, and so we're going to take gogi, we're going to add the wuk at the end. It means they, as in like plural, not as in the singular meaning of they in English, but they plural dive. So this is like many people, but you notice if we have nehioe, I'm going to use nehioe just because it's right here. So if we take nehiao from here, we add the W at the end, we get she or he, actually, yeah, speaks Cree. And if we come from the back, we get 1, 2, this is the stress right here. Oops. Nehiao. But if we add the extra syllable on to get they speak Cree, sorry, they speak Cree, now we have 1, 2, and the stress is here. So we get nehiawewak. Mich so, we hear this, right? And so when somebody says mich so, they don't hear that I. But in some regions, when we add ak to get the plural, michsoak, some regions say michsoak and some regions say michsoak, michisoak, because that I all of a sudden is in the third position, and so it's stressed, so we hear it. If that makes sense, michisoak.
I was going to tack onto that just earlier when you were talking about danse. All of this is regional in a lot of ways. So you'll hear you say, you know, it's pronounced danse, but you will actually hear fluent speakers somewhere say danse. You'll hear it. And all of these rules aren't really rules, and you kind of know. The best way to know, I guess, or is what I'm trying to get at, is like the best way to know is to listen to the language and listen to fluent speakers as much as you can, because you'll start to hear the different ways. And we do that a lot of times at like conversational Cree groups and stuff. When I went to Edmonton, we'd talk about that, like, oh, did you hear this word? Oh yeah, I heard it pronounced this way, or this person said it that way. And then somebody would say, oh, I wonder if you say it this way. And then somebody, yeah, no, I heard this elder say that there. So it's one of those things where these all seem like rules, but really this is sort of the most common way you'll hear these things, but you'll also hear variations everywhere you go.
Yeah, I mean, pronunciation will shift, but the pieces will show up somewhere else in speech in a full form, and so that's why they're written in full form, as full as possible. I mean, we do that in English. Like the other day I went down and saw the parade. So the parade, it's one syllable, right? Parade. How do you spell parade? Pa-ra-de, right? It's 3 syllables, but when we say it, we say parade. I went down to see the parade the other day. It doesn't mean that the word is parade. It just means that that's how it's pronounced or whatever, right? Where when you add on different morphemes to it, you do hear the other syllables. So yeah, that's something like when we start transcribing later on, like if you start taking videos and trying to write out what they say, Aaron brings up a really good point there. It's not gonna, the meaning will follow what I'm showing here, but the pronunciation won't. It might shift based on region, it might shift based on speaker, it might shift based on context, it might shift based on how tired someone is when they're speaking. So that's something to be aware of when you do kind of go out and try and listen to something and write it down. It can really change really quickly. And that's kind of part of the fun of transcription, is to try and figure out what you're hearing, if that makes sense.
And I have heard that the loss of, like, the dropping of a syllable in a word, like danese, is a form of linguistic genocide, because we're losing syllables in our words.
Yeah, I'm not sure really about that. I don't know anything too much about that. I mean, I don't think anyone's forcing anyone to say a word a certain way or to drop a syllable, but maybe. I'm not really, I haven't heard that personally.
Well, today it wouldn't be like that, but 30, 40 years ago when our people weren't allowed to speak the language, then it would have been forced.
There was the story our teacher told us about residential school, like when the kids weren't allowed to speak at all. And so if they did try to speak in secret, they would shorten it so the kids still kind of knew what they were talking about, but they had to say it shorter. So that was part of that process that she's referring to.
Yeah, because the example that was given was that, if brothers saw each other in the hallway, they'd say tants, because if they got caught, the repercussions were dire.
I've never heard that. That's interesting. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, so maybe that's an explanation there too for the differences regionally and whatnot. How are we all feeling? Do you want me to keep going with this, or what's everybody feel like today?
I'm good to keep going.
Okay.
It's if you want to keep going.
Sure. There's just two changes we have to watch out for when we're working with. Again, we're working. Man, it's like 10 pages up. We're working with this type of verb, right? The type of verb that only deals with one animate or one red or one object that has a wa after it. Only one of those, right? So it's not affecting anything. So these kind of sentences are going to be like, so-and-so looks good, so-and-so does something that doesn't affect anybody else. But there's only two other changes we really have to be aware of. If I can find where I'm at. And one is with verbs that start with a vowel. So if we take a toske in here, this doesn't work. And this is regional, but many regions will add a T in there. And some regions will actually add an H in there. So I'll put a T/H depending on where you are. So instead of saying niatoskan or niatos, I used a bad one. Hang on, let me use a different one because this has both rules in it. I don't want to show it at once. We're going to use ape. So if we put ape, let me just copy these down. If we put ape in here, this is a vowel. So we have to often just put an H or a T in front. So nitapin or nihapin, depending on where you are. And the same thing in this case here, kitapin or kihapin. But when it's put in the third person, there's nothing in front of it. So you just put the word. And here's another thing to watch for. IW, when they come together in this particular position in a word, are going to sound like O. And what that is if you put your mouth in the shape of making a W sound and say an I, if you can do that, it's kind of a bit tricky. But if you put it's a rounded position, so you go and you say it actually comes out as O. And so it's apo, apo. Like the W is kicking on at the same time or right before the I, so it makes it sound like an O. So a lot of people always want to spell it apo, I sit, or even apo, but in the S or O, it's spelled the same way so that our brain can link these words all as the same when we're reading. Because reading is like visual patterns, hearing is audible patterns. So apo, apuak. So we notice that one change here is that putting the T or the H.
Hang on, Ben.
Yeah, go for it. What's up?
This is where you can't say that. You can't use that term of work. Because upwalk are actually paddles for a canoe.
Apoyak.
No, apoy is a one paddle, but you don't say apoyak. Apoy is one paddle.
Yeah, and then you add
Apoyak.
up, right?
No, no.
Okay, so it changes to a rounded vowel in your area. That's cool.
Apoyak.
Yeah.
Paddles for a canoe. Yeah.
What about Niso Napesasak Apuak?
Well, if apiwak, it's easy to say apiwak.
Oh, so you say Apiwak in your region?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so that's a really interesting thing. So regionally, I guess some places I've never actually heard that anywhere, so that's really cool. Apuak. I guess some
because
regions
it's too, because apuak, like even if you use the th slang to that, it's too, unless you're really fluent, you're going to be talking about paddles.
That's interesting. I've never heard a region that pronounces a short IW. No, that's really cool. So
I guess Stanley Mission does too then. That's what Robert said.
Yeah.
Oh.
Same.
And you're probably wondering why they're not sitting down. Why are they telling me paddles?
two ducks paddles? What? Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So there's a really good example of a regional difference. There are some regions that does sound as upwalk, but not in Lloyd or in Stanley Mission, in Lloyd's region or Stanley Mission. So that's cool. So that's another thing to be aware of. But again, and that's actually a good point. So that if somebody was writing it like this because they say upo, but somebody else says upo, then you can see how this has a benefit of holding the pattern of kit the pin, knit the pin, right? It looks the same. Whereas spelling something as it sounds in the region that you're in doesn't actually make as much sense because in another region, it's not said that way. So,
do you think that that's a shortened version of apeota?
Apeota.
Sit now?
Sit here.
Sit here?
Apeota. So that's two words. That's like sit here.
What do you think, Lloyd?
Tell her
It's two words.
So Lloyd, how would you say that then instead of upwak up here, up in upu and upwak? How would you say that word instead then?
It's not on. It's not on mute. So
What's that?
How would you say that instead? Like you know how you
Which
said
one?
What? The
Which
upu
one?
and upwak?
Apiwak, yeah.
You said not to say that because it's paddles. How would you say it instead?
Apiwak. We use a I. Apiwak.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Apiwak. Not
He
apuwak.
meant a pow.
yeah, because you're not stressing that.
No, apil. We would say apil, not apo. Never say apo.
Never. Okay.
Well, the only time I heard it is when my niece said, "Matega go suga po niece." He's just trying to tell me to pull harder on the paddle.
Oh, I thought he was telling you were up the creek.
No, he would have been up the creek if he told me that.
Bill.
We wouldn't say apo.
And so that what he was trying to say is he was trying to shorten that word.
Apo.
Sounds like
So this, I'm just going to put a star in front showing that there's a vowel there so something can change. And the only other change that can happen here is if the word ends in an E, when we add an N afterwards, the E sounds like an A. So it sounds a lot harder than actually doing it is. So let me just copy this again. So if we just plop the HOA in here, notice that that E is followed by an N. That's going to change to a long A. Ninahiowan. Ninahiowan. It's not going to be Ninahiowain. It's going to be Ninahiowan. So those are the two changes we have to watch out for when we're putting verbs of this type into this framework. Again, the reason I do this is because I don't have any speakers around me. So in order to practice, I needed to find ways to make words by myself that I knew were words. But notice here, it's not followed by an N, so it stays as an E. Nehiaweo. She or he speaks Cree. And again, down here, Nehiawewak. So that's the only other rule with this framework. So there's two rules. One, if it starts with an A, like ape, you add either a T or regionally an H. I've heard more so the T, but I have seen the H. So nitapin, kitapin. And then the other change is right here. If it ends in an E and it's followed by an N in this position, you change it to an A. So if we take a word like atoske, it actually has both. And that's why I jumped out of it at first. Because if we put it in this framework, we have to add a T at the beginning, and we have to change that E at the end to an A. So we say nitatos, and then the E changes to an A, and we get an, nitatoskan. So I'll put a star at the end for the ones that end in an E, just to remind us that there's a change there. And does anyone feel brave to start running through some of these with me?
I can try.
Awesome. Let's start with Gogi, just because it's written here, just to kind of get us rolling. Do you want to read through these?
Nikogan,
Nigogin, yeah.
Nikogin, Kogyu, Kogiwak, Kogiwak.
Kogiwak. Awesome. Now let's throw in ape, but remember there's a star in the front, so we got to add that T in the first two.
Okay. Nitapin, Kitapin, Apu, Apawak.
Perfect.
In this dialect.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to try Nehioe?
Yeah, the Nehio one, Kin Nehio one, Nehio will,
Yep.
Nehio wak.
Nehiawewak.
Oh, yeah, Nehiawewak.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's awesome. How about let's do atoske. Now remember, this one's got the two rules, right? So we've got this. I'm just going to use the T for tonight. Does anyone hear the H in their region? Because it's just one more thing to remember. It's cool with everyone. We'll just use the T for.
Okay. Just be in there. Right? Okay. Nitato scan. Nitato scan. Kitato scan.
Nitatoskan.
No, not tan. There's no U. Tan.
Kitato scan.
Nitatoskan.
Atato
There's no U?
go. Atato go.
Atoskeo.
Atato skill. Is that right, or another word?
But I know that's, I've heard.
Tato skill what?
Sounds almost like a U
Tato skill wak.
in some places.
Is that right?
Atoskewak. Yeah.
Okay.
You've got it right here. So the stress is here, and I'll just sorry, I should be bolding the stresses just to make it a little. Why don't you try? Can you read through them once more? But I'll just give me 1 second, and I'll bold the stresses so it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
There, try that.
Tatoscan.
Tatoskan.
Netatoscan. Kitatoscan.
Yeah.
Atosku. Atoskiwak.
Atoskiwak. Yeah, awesome. So that's all and so whenever we go in the dictionary and we see VAI, that's this type of verb. So anytime you see a VAI verb, as long as you apply these two rules, if they apply, or if they don't, just plop the verb into these frameworks, you can say them. So to kind of show this, let's go really quickly, let's go to the dictionary. Somebody give me a verb.
Punch.
Anybody? Punch. So we put it in punches, right? She or he punches. We always put it in the third person form. And notice that, well, they don't show it here. That's poor on the preview. If we hold this over here, can we see how it says VTA3 at the end of that pop-up menu? Does everyone see that? Transitive animate verb class 3, VTA3. That's a VTA. We're looking for a VAI. So we'll go down here. This one won't be one. Here we go. That's not punch, but can we try another verb? This, I guess, punch is kind of transitive. You have to punch something, right?
What about
What about kick?
You also have to kick something. How about a word that describes somebody?
Like to fly, to
Then you have to think.
Tall. Tall.
Tall. Okay. So perfect.
big lips.
So we can see that this is a VAI, right?
You got a big ears.
So we can
So
we can do big ears after for sure. That one will work too. So if we take this,
What? No.
but remember that the dictionary already puts it in this form right here. So we need to take the W off.
There's a place called that, eh? What was it? I wonder if that's just a. Yeah, as if it.
Ito. Nikinosin. Kikinosin.
Yep.
Kinosu. Kinosuwak.
Nice. Perfect. I don't know who it was that read that, but it was awesome. So why don't we do another one here? So like anyone on their own, if they need to look up something, like, let's try short. Another trick is if it says it in the definition, it's not going to be a VAI. It has to say s/he, like she or he. So let's use this one. So again, we see it's a VAI, so we know it'll fit the form. Chimisisu. So and again, so in the dictionary, it's already in this form, so we have to take the W off to get the root of the word. And now, who wants to put that in the frameworks here?
Okay. Chimisisin.
Yeah.
Ki chimisisin.
Yep.
Chimisisu.
Yep.
Chimisisawak.
Nice. That's perfect. So yeah, basically that one was easy again, right? It ended in an I. It didn't end in an E, and it didn't start with a vowel. So you just plug it into the framework and just sit there, yeah, saying it. One thing, a little study tip I can give you is when I started, it can be really boring sitting here being like, right? That's like, it can be completely boring, but something a person can do to mix it up is, 1 second here. What I did was, I don't know if you can see this here. Can everyone see my camera? And I made a little dice, and it has first person, second, third person. And what I did was I would sit here with a word like chimisiso, and I'd roll the dice, and it would say, okay, first person, so chimisisin. And I'd roll it again, okay, third person, chimisiso. And what it did is it made it not the same thing. It made my brain actually think about which one I wanted instead of just running through the lines. So it made it kind of random. I found that helped me. This can be, you can make this really easy if you have a small box at home or anything that you can rub tape on, and then just write me, you, she, he, them, whatever you want to study. And then you just roll the dice. Like you can make your own dice and
You could
minutes.
just make a paper box dice.
Yeah, exactly. That works perfect. Yeah. Whatever. One thing I found that's really easy is those like ABC cubes that you can get at the dollar store for 2 cents. Those work really well too. Or even normal dice itself, you could just use that. So I know it's a little
I'll just wait for your Etsy store.
bit. Well, yeah, I made the 8-sided dice because there's 8 categories, but it's easier to make 6. So yeah, that's that framework right there. And so that's how I learned how to work with these type of verbs. And again, when you go to the top, there's only 4 types, right? So if we learn those for this ones, then we just need to learn the patterns for this verb type right here, for this verb type right here, and for this verb type right here. And yeah, that's basically how so now when we were talking about, actually, I have give me one moment. I have a picture that I wanted to show. If I can find it here really quick. I took a snapshot of a page I was reading. Yeah, here it is. Can we see this all right? So this is out of a book I was reading. And that first pattern that we just did, this word is in that pattern, 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 this word is in this pattern, this word is in that pattern, this one here is in that pattern, and this one here is in that pattern. So you can see, like, by learning that pattern, then we know what to break off and what part to look up if we were trying to figure out when we're reading this, like, oh, I don't know what nicht tawigi is. Well, then, like, egi nicht tawigian is I was born. But once we know that pattern, we know what we can cut off, and we can look this part up in the dictionary if we don't know it. So that's kind of how I got reading. Aaron might have some other, or someone else can jump in if they got other ideas on how to learn to read. That worked for me, though. The more familiar I got with the patterns, the more I could break them down and be able to figure out what part I needed to look up.